I don't know what's wrong though, but the mom was like pushed her down the steps. Pushed her down the steps because she was crying too much.
Opinion, the cause of death is battered child syndrome with acute and chronic intracranial hemorrhages and starvation.
So it's a combination of starvation and the trauma to the head?
Yes.
For over an hour, Hamilton County Deputy Coroner Dr. Jennifer Schott detailed every burn, cut, scar, scrape, and bruise.
You feel strong, don't you? Like you could take on the world? Then why not prove it? Head to the zoo and step into the cage with a lion or a tiger. Any member of the feline family will do. Too much? Fine. Step into the UFC octagon and put that strength to work. But what does it say about you when the only proponent you can overpower is a defenseless child? What kind of strength does it take to slam a child against a wall, leaving bruises, scars, and broken bones? And what does it mean when even the child's sister testifies against you, confirming the horror? This is not just a story. This is a descent into the darkest corners of human depravity. Glenara, a little girl who weighed just 13 pounds when she died, bore the evidence of unimaginable cruelty. Burns, bite marks, belt lashes, open sores, and missing teeth. Her tiny body was a map of suffering, a testament to the evil that lurks in places we dare not look. But this is not just about her. This is about the man who inflicted this pain, the system that judged him, and the twisted partnership that allowed it to happen. Why was he spared the death penalty after pleading not guilty? Why did his girlfriend, who stood by as this nightmare unfolded, plead no contest? What kind of justice allows such a story to end without the ultimate punishment? These are the questions that will claw at your mind as we unravel this tale, and I promise you, by the end, you will have answers. Answers that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about strength, justice, and the monsters who walk among us. This is not just a crime story. This is a psychological thriller, a courtroom drama, and a chilling exploration of human nature. It's a story that will grip you from the first word and refuse to let go. You'll find yourself asking, how could someone do this? How could anyone stand by and let it happen? And how could the system fail so catastrophically? But be warned, this is not for the faint of heart. It's raw, it's real, and it's relentless. It's a story that will haunt you, one that will linger in your thoughts long after you've turned the last page. So fasten your seatbelt, you're about to be taken on a journey into the heart of darkness, and there's no turning back. Stay with me. The answers are coming, and trust me, you'll want to be here when they do. Welcome to Detective Jeffrey Crime Station. A huge thank you to our amazing subscribers and viewers for joining us on this journey into the world of true crime. We're honored that you've chosen to spend your time with us, and we're grateful for your trust and support. If you're new here, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell to stay up to date on our latest captivating stories. Your engagement means the world to us, and we can't wait to share more thrilling and thought-provoking content with you. In the quiet neighborhoods of Hamilton County, a story unfolded that would shake the community to its core and test the boundaries of human compassion. Glenn Bates began serving a lengthy prison sentence for a crime that left even hardened detectives haunted: the starvation and death of his own daughter, a tiny soul named Glenara who never reached her third birthday. What began as a routine arrest in March 2015 would evolve into a case that exposed not only the darkest corners of human cruelty, but also the catastrophic failures of a system designed to protect the most vulnerable. The tragic tale began when Cincinnati police officers were called to Cincinnati Children's Hospital, where Glenara Bates had arrived in a condition that defied description. The little girl weighed a mere 13 pounds, less than half the weight of an average 2-year-old. Her frail body, more bone than flesh, told a horrific story through its landscape of suffering. Deep scars layered upon older scars, untreated burns that had festered, open sores that revealed neglect in its most extreme form, and missing teeth that hinted at violence too terrible to contemplate. The marks of belt strikes crisscrossed her back, while human bite impressions, adult-sized, punctuated her arms and legs. One veteran Cincinnati police detective, a man who had walked through decades of human depravity, would later describe it as the worst case of child abuse he had encountered in his entire career. What forces could drive parents to inflict such torment on their own flesh and blood? Behind the peeling paint and drawn curtains of an East Walnut Hills home, Glenara had lived with 5 siblings under the ostensible care of her mother, Andrea Bradley and Glenn Bates. The household, chaotic and dangerous, concealed horrors that would only fully emerge through meticulous forensic evidence and heartbreaking testimony. What transpired in that house would eventually be revealed in court, painting a picture so grim that jurors were seen wiping away tears and sometimes averting their eyes from photographic evidence too disturbing to behold. How could such suffering continue undetected or unremedied for so long in a neighborhood where children played and neighbors greeted one another? I saw her head get banged on the wall. I guess they got mad, testified Glenara's 10-year-old sister during the trial, her young voice quavering with the weight of terrible memories. The child's testimony, delivered with a simplicity that made it all the more devastating, described scenes of routine brutality. He hit her, he held her, and hit her head against the wall, she continued, her small hands demonstrating the violent motion with a disturbing familiarity that suggested she had witnessed such acts many times before. The child witness also revealed a chilling dynamic within the household that sent murmurs through the courtroom. "My mom didn't like her, so she got beat," she said of her little sister, a statement that in its childish directness conveyed a household where affection determined safety and where Glenara had been tragically designated as unworthy of love. What could a toddler possibly have done to inspire such antipathy in her own mother? The prosecution meticulously constructed a timeline of abuse that spanned Glenara's short life. The night before her death, prosecutors argued, with barely contained emotion, Bates had grabbed the toddler by her legs and swung her against a wall like a baseball bat, an act of violence so extreme that it caused immediate brain trauma. The following day, as her small body began to shut down from the combined effects of starvation and head injuries, her breathing became labored. When she cried out in pain, witnesses reported hearing Bates shout for her to shut up. Shortly thereafter, there was only silence, the kind of silence that should never fall around a child. Her cause of death would later be officially recorded in clinical, detached medical terminology: acute and chronic head injuries, battered child syndrome, and starvation. But these sterile words failed to capture the profound suffering of a child who had known little else in her brief existence. The autopsy revealed that her stomach was completely empty at the time of death. How long had it been since someone had bothered to feed her? Days, perhaps? When first brought to trial, Bates maintained his innocence regarding the most serious charges, his face impassive as prosecutors displayed photographs of Glenara's injuries to the jury. His attorney built a defense on minimal contact, insisting that Bates had only been living in the home for 2 weeks before Glenara died and therefore couldn't be responsible for the long-term abuse evident on her body. Bates himself admitted to biting and dropping the child, but claimed with an unsettling lack of emotion that he was only playing. The jury, after hearing testimony that often left the courtroom in stunned silence, wasn't convinced by these explanations. After deliberations that were remarkably brief given the severity of the charges, Bates was found guilty and sentenced to death in 2016. The community breathed a collective sigh, believing justice had been served. But was it truly? The Ohio Supreme Court would later determine it was not. At least not properly. 4 years after his conviction in 2020, the court overturned the verdict upon discovering that Bates' attorneys had allowed a juror who expressed racial bias in a questionnaire to serve on the case. The system had fallen short not only in protecting Glenara during her life, but also in ensuring that the legal proceedings surrounding her death were conducted with proper diligence. What would follow was a legal journey that raised profound questions about fairness, responsibility, and the value placed on a child's life within our justice system. After initially rejecting a plea deal, adamant about his limited culpability, Bates eventually agreed in 2023 to plead guilty to involuntary manslaughter, felonious assault, and child endangering. The death penalty was removed from consideration, and he received a 25-year prison sentence with credit for 8 years already served. Was this adequate punishment for the role he played in extinguishing a young life with such calculated cruelty? Many in the community didn't think so, but the prosecutor's office defended the plea as a guarantee of substantial prison time without the uncertainty of another trial. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel as a means of encouraging us. Thank you as you do so. Meanwhile, Andrea Bradley, Glenara's mother, had pleaded no contest to murder and child abuse charges in 2018, neither admitting nor denying the accusations against her. At a court hearing on a Tuesday in Hamilton County, prosecutors did not challenge the findings of a psychologist who had evaluated 30-year-old Andrea Bradley. The psychologist had determined that Bradley was intellectually disabled, a diagnosis that carried significant legal implications. Under U.S. Supreme Court rulings, executing individuals with intellectual disabilities violates the Constitution's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. This meant that if Bradley were convicted, she could not face the death penalty. A trial date was set for April 2017 in Hamilton County Common Pleas Court, with Judge Robert Ruhlman presiding over the case. Psychological experts had assessed Bradley's IQ and found it to be in the mid-60s, well below the threshold of 75 used to determine intellectual disability. This diagnosis became a pivotal point in her defense. Bradley was the mother of 3 children, all fathered by her co-defendant, Carl Bates. Among them was Glenara, the little girl whose tragic death had brought this case to light, and another child Bradley had given birth to while in jail awaiting trial. The circumstances surrounding Bradley's life were fraught with complexity, and her attorneys painted a picture of a woman who had been controlled and abused by Bates. Bradley's legal team argued that Bates had exerted a dominating and abusive influence over her, shaping her actions and decisions in ways that were not fully within her control. They portrayed her as a victim in her own right, caught in a web of manipulation and violence. The defense's narrative sought to contextualize her involvement in the events that led to Glenara's death, suggesting that her intellectual limitations and the abusive dynamics of her relationship with Bates had played a significant role in the tragedy. As the trial date approached, the case drew attention not only for its horrific details, but also for the legal and moral questions it raised. Could someone with Bradley's intellectual limitations be held fully accountable for her actions? How much of her behavior had been shaped by the abuse she endured? And what did justice look like in a case where the lines between perpetrator and victim seemed so blurred? These questions hung heavy in the air as the court prepared to hear the evidence and determine the fates of those involved. The story of Andrea Bradley, Carl Bates, and the children they shared was one of pain, loss, and the search for answers in the face of unimaginable darkness. At the end, she had to pay in some way. She began serving a sentence of 15 years to life in prison, her other children placed in foster care or with relatives. Her attorney portrayed her as herself a victim of manipulation, of abuse, of mental illness untreated. But could any circumstance truly explain or mitigate a mother's role in the slow torture of her own child? But the tragedy of Glenara Bates extended far beyond just her final days and the subsequent legal proceedings. Court records and social service documents reluctantly unsealed as part of civil litigation revealed a system that had recognized her vulnerability only to return her to danger. Born in January 2013, Glenara had briefly been placed in foster care after her birth, a recognition that her parents were ill-equipped to provide proper care. For reasons that would later be scrutinized with agonizing hindsight, officials made the fateful decision to return her to her parents' home, where conditions had hardly improved. Had the signs been missed or simply ignored due to overwhelming caseloads and institutional indifference? In December 2014, just 3 months before her death, Bradley had taken Glenn3r to the hospital for what she claimed was a minor fall. Medical staff, alarmed by what they observed, noted that the child was malnourished, severely underweight, and unable to walk normally. At that time, she weighed just over 17 pounds, already dangerously underweight. Hospital records indicated concerns were communicated to Child Protective Services. Yet somehow, inexplicably, she was returned to the same environment where she would lose 4 more precious pounds before her death, every ounce representing a failure of the very system designed to protect her. A federal civil rights lawsuit filed by Glenn3r's maternal grandmother, Desana Bradley, claimed that social services officials knew about the abuse, but still left the child with her parents. The lawsuit described in searing language how Glenn3r was removed from the cruel and inhumane custody of her parents and then thrown back into that squalor and depravity. It alleged that caseworkers had visited the home multiple times, had observed concerning conditions, but had failed to take definitive action. How many opportunities had there been to save one small life? How many red flags had been noted and then filed away? The evidence is clear that Glenn3r Bates should never have died on March 29, 2015. Chief Assistant Prosecuting Attorney Rick Gibson said during his closing arguments, his voice rising with rarely displayed emotion. She was literally beaten from head to toes, scars over scars, bruises, abrasions, burn. The prosecutor displayed a final photograph of Glenn3r taken at the hospital, a child so emaciated that medical personnel had initially believed she was much younger than her actual age. The courtroom fell silent at the image, the collective weight of societal failure hanging in the air. In a rare acknowledgement of institutional responsibility, Murd3r, Director for Hamilton County Job and Family Services, admitted in a statement that we failed to follow our own policies and procedures in Glenn3r's case. An internal review had uncovered missed visits, incomplete assessments, and alarming gaps in documentation. But could such clinical acknowledgments begin to address the magnitude of what had been lost? Could procedural improvements bring back a child who had slipped through every crack in a system theoretically designed to catch her? The other children from the household told investigators of the special cruelty reserved for Glenn3r. While all had experienced neglect to varying degrees, Glenn3r had been singled out, forced to sleep in a bathtub filled with feces and cold water as punishment, fed irregularly if at all, and subjected to physical abuse that the other children were sometimes forced to witness as a warning. What psychological dynamics had led to this child being designated as the household scapegoat? And what lasting trauma would her siblings carry, having witnessed such horrors? The neighbors later told reporters they had occasionally heard crying from the house, but hadn't felt it was their place to intervene. Teachers at a nearby school admitted they had noticed concerning behaviors in one of the older siblings, but hadn't followed up when the child stopped attending. A delivery person recalled seeing a thin child peering from a window, but had dismissed the uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. How many eyes had inadvertently glimpsed pieces of the puzzle without seeing the complete picture? How many small decisions to look away had culminated in a tragedy that, in retrospect, seemed horribly preventable? As Glenn Bates began serving his sentence at a state correctional facility, maintaining little contact with the outside world, and as Andrea Bradley continued hers at the Ohio Reformatory for Women, the community was left to grapple with uncomfortable questions that extended far beyond the individuals directly responsible. How many other Glenn3rists might still be out there, waiting for someone to notice their silent cries for help. What responsibility did society as a whole bear for children born into circumstances where the odds were stacked against them from their first breath? In the years following Glenara's death, Hamilton County implemented new protocols for child welfare cases, increased funding for home visits, and established better coordination between medical providers and social services. But could bureaucratic improvements truly address the deeper issue? The societal willingness to look away from uncomfortable truths about child welfare, particularly in communities already struggling with poverty and limited resources? The house where Glenara spent her final days was eventually demolished, part of a neighborhood renewal project. A small memorial garden was planted on the site, with perennial flowers chosen to bloom each spring around the anniversary of her death. Local children sometimes left small toys or drawings at the site, though few knew the specific details of the tragedy that had occurred there. Was this acknowledgement sufficient? Could any memorial adequately honor a life that had known so little kindness? In the end, a courtroom could deliver a sentence, but could it deliver understanding or healing? Could any punishment truly balance the scales for a life that had ended before it had truly begun? As Glenara's story gradually faded from headlines, replaced by newer tragedies and controversies, these questions remained unanswered, a weight carried not just by those directly responsible for her death, but by a system and society that had collectively failed to protect one of its most vulnerable members. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of Glenara's story was not the exceptional cruelty she endured, but the ordinariness of the mechanisms that failed her, the routine paperwork that wasn't properly filed, the follow-up visits that were postponed due to high caseloads, the concerns that were noted but not escalated. In the mundane procedural failures lay the most profound questions about our collective responsibilities to children who cannot protect themselves. Would Glenara's death truly change anything, or would the system continue to stumble in the same ways with different children? As seasons passed and justice took its imperfect course, Glenara Bates, the child who had weighed so little in life, left behind a legacy that weighed heavily on all who encountered her story. In that weight, perhaps, lay the only meaning that could be salvaged from such senseless suffering: the obligation to remember, to question, and to do better by all the children who remained at risk in situations hidden behind closed doors and systemic indifference. We hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new. Because you did, subscribe to our channel and hit the like button to show your appreciation. Additionally, tap the notification bell to be kept abreast with our latest videos and ensure you don't miss out on any new content. This will keep you informed about our upcoming true crime stories and allow you to stay engaged with our community. Thank you once again. Your support means a lot to us.